Welcome to the Department of Licenses and Inspections instructional video series. In this video, we will provide background information about zoning in Philadelphia and provide guidance in conducting zoning research to determine the lawful use of a property. What is zoning? A zoning or use registration permit ensures that development aligns with the general character of a neighborhood to protect quality of life. For example, the construction of a factory on a residential block would negatively impact residents and would not be permitted. In Philadelphia, the zoning code determines what uses are permitted on a lot, the size of a building that can be constructed, where accessory structures like fences, decks or solar panels can be located, and how much parking is required based on a given use. Per Section A301.1.5 of the Administrative Code, a zoning permit and/or use registration permit is required for the construction or demolition of structures, the change in the exterior dimensions of a structure, the change to the gross floor area of a structure, and the change in use. This includes parking and signage. There are many exemptions that do not require a zoning permit and/or use registration permit. Here are a few of the most common zoning exemptions. A zoning permit and/or use registration permit is not required for the construction and use of structures totally outside of lot lines, fences at or below the height allowable by the zoning code, sheds, playhouses, pergolas, and similar structures, accessory to one or two family dwellings, provided the structure is located in the rear yard and does not exceed 120 square feet. And decks not more than 12 inches high and not over any basement or story below. For a full list of exemptions, refer to the Administrative Code Section A301.2.5. Sometimes, how the permit was obtained can impact the property owner's rights in the future. The following terms are used to describe how a zoning permit is obtained. A by right permit means that the scope of the permit application complies with the zoning code, in effect at the time the permit is applied for. A by right permit can be issued without the support of the community and without an appeal to the Zoning Board of Adjustments. If a permit is granted by variance or special exception, it means that one or more aspects of the application did not comply with the zoning code in effect at the time the permit is applied for. When this happens, L&I issues a refusal or referral, and the applicant can appeal the decision to the zoning board. Before the hearing occurs, the owner is required to meet with the community. Nonconforming means that one or more aspects of an existing property do not conform with the requirements of the current zoning code, because it was established either before the adoption of zoning in Philadelphia, in 1933, or before a zoning code amendment was passed. Zoning approvals run with the land. This means that zoning approvals are granted to the land, not the property owner. Here is an example. If the person you bought your home from was granted approval to encroach into the required side yard by 2 feet to construct a garage, then you, as the current owner, can continue to legally use the garage too. When the ownership of a property changes, a new zoning permit is not required to document that change. Here lists a few acronyms used during this video. In this lesson, we will show you how to read a zoning permit. Permit records may look different, depending on when they were issued. We will walk you through a few examples of possible types of permits that you may find while conducting your zoning research. If you see a zoning record similar to this sample, you will need to look for a stamp on the front of the application page. This stamp indicates that the permit was approved and provides the date of approval. You can also determine if the permit is issued by a zoning board of adjustment variance or special exception by looking at this document. A permit that was issued by variance will have a calendar number listed. The approved use will be written at the bottom of the last page of the application as shown in this image. Additional provisos imposed by the board will also be listed on the last page of the application, next to the use, if applicable. In this example, the permit was issued by variance, but has no provisos. If you see a zoning record similar to the example on the right, the approved use will be listed under the Use Registration section. By looking at this document, you can also determine if the permit is issued by a zoning board of adjustment variance. A permit that was issued by variance will have a calendar number and date listed. Additional provisos imposed by the board will also be listed if applicable. In this example, the permit was not issued by Variance, and has no provisos. If you see a zoning record similar to the example to the right, the approved use will be listed under the Approved Use section. By looking at this document, you can determine if the permit is issued by a Zoning Board of Adjustment Variance. A permit that was issued by Variance will have a calendar number and date listed. Additional provisos imposed by the board will also be listed if applicable. In this example, the permit was not issued by Variance and has no provisos. The first zoning code in Philadelphia was enacted in 1933. The code has changed drastically since it was first introduced. One of the most significant and recent changes was the adoption of the new zoning code. On August 22, 2012, Philadelphia started enforcing what many refer to as the new zoning code. This was the first comprehensive rewrite of the zoning code in over 50 years. Under the old zoning code, uses were defined with great specificity, and a use was prohibited if it was not expressly permitted under the code. The new code took a different approach by grouping individual uses into general use categories and subcategories. This approach has two main benefits. First, the changes in use that are within the same use category do not require a new permit. For an example, a hair salon and a yoga studio are both categorized as personal services. If a hair salon opens with a use permit for personal services, in the future, that space can be converted into a yoga studio without obtaining a new use permit. Secondly, to be permitted, a use does not have to be explicitly mentioned in the code. This is especially useful when it comes to new or trendy businesses. A few examples include escape rooms, hatchet throwing, cat cafes, and e-commerce. In this section, we will discuss zoning permit expirations and permit extensions. If a use is not established, or has not started, the zoning permit will expire. The time frame to establish a use is based on whether or not construction work is involved. If construction is required to establish the use, the permit is valid for 3 years. If no construction is required, the permit is valid for 6 months. For further explanation about the expiration of zoning permits in certain scenarios, please review Code Bulletin Z, 1901, found on the website at phila.gov/li. The Code Bulletin also covers the expiration of the zoning board decisions, permit extensions, and amended permits. What does it mean to establish a use? When a use is established, it means that the activity has begun on the property, with or without all the necessary permits and licenses. The issuance of a zoning permit serves as an approval, but does not grant permission for the permit holder to alter the property to accommodate the new use. Typically, if the use of a property changes, a zoning permit, a building permit, and a certificate of occupancy are all required to legally establish the use. If the applicant claims that the use associated with the use registration permit was never established, the legal use reverts back to the previous use that was legally established. If a use has been established, but the proper building permits or a certificate of occupancy were not issued, the use is considered established for the purposes of zoning, but it must be legalized with a building permit. The work done without a permit must be legalized, and a certificate of occupancy must be obtained. In some cases, the department could accept a report from a design professional, confirming that the present configuration supports the owner's claim. What is an abandoned use? If a use is intentionally discontinued or abandoned for 3 or more years, a new permit may need to be obtained to continue that use. Please note, this does not apply to regulated uses. If a regulated use discontinues operation for a continuous period of 90 days or more, a new permit will need to be obtained to continue that use. Some examples of regulated uses are gun shops and drug paraphernalia stores. For more information about regulated uses and requirements, please see Section 14.603.13 of the Zoning Code. If there are gaps in permits or licenses, it does not necessarily mean that the use was intentionally abandoned. The department only deems a use abandoned if the use was intentionally discontinued and the space was repurposed or the building was gutted. Per Section 14.303.10(d) of the Philadelphia Zoning Code, the Department of Licenses and Inspections and the Zoning Board both have the authority to extend a zoning permit or approval. Approvals granted under the same application are eligible for a single extension. Once the extension is issued, the permit is valid for 1 year, from the original expiration date of the permit, or zoning board approval. For more information about zoning permit extensions, please refer to the information sheet on the website. To determine if you need a zoning permit, you can perform zoning research. Atlas and ECLIPSE are both tools that are available to help you perform a zoning research and determine the lawful use of a property. In the next section, we will go over details about each tool. ECLIPSE is the online system that L&I currently uses to issue permits, licenses, certificates, and violations. Permits have been issued through ECLIPSE since March 2020. L&I and some other city departments and agencies have access to ECLIPSE. You must register an account to submit an application through the online system. However, there are features of ECLIPSE that are available to the general public without having to log in. These features include searching permit and license information that is available to the public, requesting a certificate of rental suitability, and paying an L&I violation fee or fine. When conducting zoning research, you can use the Search ECLIPSE option on the ECLIPSE homepage to run daily reports on zoning permits. You can also search for permits by address, permit number, contractor, or by issued date. Additionally, you can search for trade licenses, rental licenses, or business licenses, using the business name, business location, or license number. Atlas is a website that provides parcel-specific information. Some things you can do with Atlas are: get the history of permits, licenses, inspections, appeals, and building certifications for a specific property. You can review real estate information, such as property values, zoning, and document archives. You can view recent activity around an address, such as 311 service requests. And you can explore historical imagery and maps. You can access Atlas at atlas.phila.gov. To search for an address in the city, you can use the search bar, or you can click on parcels shown on the map. On the left side of the screen, you will see several different tabs. Click through them to explore the information that is available on Atlas. Under the Property Assessment tab, you can research real estate information, including property values, based on the Office of Property Assessment's records. Please note, if the property was recently sold, this information may not yet be updated. When you click on the Deeds tab, you will see the parcel details and links to documents, including deeds of the property. Additionally, if you zoom into the map, you will see dimensions added to the parcel. Under the Licenses and Inspections tab, you can find most of the information relevant to your search. We will go over these in more detail next. Under the Licenses and Inspections tab, you can find headings as noted below. In the Building Certification section, you can find all certifications submitted for the property. The certification types, date of inspection, inspection results, and the expiration date of the certification will be listed. You can find the history of permits in the Permits section. By clicking on the link for each permit, you will see details related to that permit. If you click on a zoning permit, you will see a link for zoning documents, where you can view the permit and approved plans. Please note, the types of permits that will not appear in this section include permits that are still under review or not yet issued, permits issued before June 2006, and permits issued by another department. In the Zoning Permit Documents section, you can find 3 different types of zoning records: zoning permits issued in ECLIPSE, and the associated plans. Scanned records of zoning permits issued prior to ECLIPSE. Plans of zoning applications that are not issued, but are under appeal. Please note, the records for applications seeking variances, or special exception approvals from the zoning board, will be listed without a date, since the permit has not been issued. In the Inspections section, all the cases associated with the property will be listed. By clicking on a case, you can see the specific violations associated with that case, and the status of the investigation. Inspections associated with building permits will not be listed in this section. In the Violations section, you can see specific violations that are issued to a property, and the status of the violation. And in the Business Licenses section, you can see licenses that are issued to the property, along with the status. By clicking on the license, you can find more specific information, such as the number of units associated with a rental license. Licenses that are not tied to an address, like mobile vending licenses, are not listed in Atlas. Under the Zoning tab, you will see the zoning map appear on the right side of the screen. And on the left side of the screen, you will find the parcel's base zoning district, any applicable overlays, any pending legislation that impacts the zoning, any zoning board appeals, and the registered community organizations associated with the property. Atlas also has very useful mapping and imagery tools. We will go over them in detail next. If you click on the icon in the top right corner of the screen, you can see satellite and street images of any property. In the pull-down menu located on the top right-hand corner of the screen, you can also change the year to see how a property has changed over time. There is a measuring tool that you can use to estimate distances and areas. And finally, you can also find historical maps of a property by selecting older years, such as 1962 or earlier. Now that you know the available tools, you can now perform research and determine the legal use of a property. You can use the following information to help you determine if a use of a property is legal. Review the permit records in Atlas to identify the last permitted use and associated CO. If there are no records documenting the existing use, refer to the next slide for additional dates to consider. If there is a use permit but no associated CO, the use is not considered legal, and additional research is required to establish the last legal use. You may need to review the zoning history to locate zoning permits and associated building permits that predate ECLIPSE. The following are lists of dates to consider. If a use was established prior to June 30, 1969, it predates the requirement for a CO and is considered legal. If a use was established after June 30, 1969 and there is no CO on file, additional research is required. If a use was established between June 30, 1969 and December 1999, a use registration permit is sufficient to establish legal use. If there is any indication in the permit records that the use is not legal, those may be considered. If a use was established after 1999, and there is no record substantiating use and occupancy, the use is not legal. And lastly, if there is no zoning record available, you may need to perform additional research. To document continuous legal use, you may consider the following. First, research the license history. If there is a lapse in license, it is in violation of the license requirement but does not necessarily mean the use is lost. If there is a vacant license, it does not necessarily mean the property is vacant unless the license was issued over 3 years ago, and no new licenses have been obtained. Second, research the history of violation cases and expired zoning applications. You can check if there are any zoning permits that were denied, or any use violations issued on a property. This can be used to verify if any use changes were observed by an inspector, or proposed on the property. Finally, if there are no other records available in Atlas, the owner may provide proof to the department, to show the property has been used as such, for the last 3 years. For purposes of zoning, if no records, or proof of the use are available, the use shall be reviewed as new. Please note, if the documented use was not occupied as stated, the community has the right to file an appeal. Thanks for watching. For more information, check out the other instructional videos, frequently asked questions, and resources at www.phila.gov/li.